Dear participants of our conference, dear guests, dear our students, that's my honor and pleasure to introduce you our first speaker, our guest professor, who is Professor Emeritus of the Illinois University of Urbana-Champaign from the United States of America, Professor Clifford Christians. A couple words about our professor. First of all, he is Professor Emeritus in various fields, including journalism, media communication, media studies, but he is also a theologist and sociolinguist. Now he is our senior Fulbright Scholar guest professor at our program of media communications. He is lecturing for our students, and he has showed his absolutely unique methodology and very interesting, original, modern approach toward media ethics. Among his theories, there is one of his own. He himself coined a new theory on proto-norm on media ethics, so during our questions and answers session you may ask about it. 3 years ago, our program has translated his book entitled Media Ethics, Cases and Moral Reasoning, the 9th edition. There is already a 10th edition of the book. Professor Christians is a co-author of the book and a compiler of it. So the translation looks like this. If you want to buy it, you may do this. It's available in the atrium. We will talk about the book more precisely during our discussion, during our round table at 2:30. But now we are honored to hear a keynote speech of our guest professor entitled Ethics of Human Dignity in the New Media World. Dear Professor, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Oh, Professor Maria Typetenko, you are always so generous, thoughtful. You've been an exceptional host during these Fulbright weeks at this great university. It is a high privilege, Professor Victoria Romaniuk, to be included in this 4th conference on identity and media. UCU is showing leadership in our field on this important and complicated topic. And believe me, it is worth everything in my being to be included. I trust that my thinking from the philosophy of technology will contribute to this massively important topic. So I've chosen the ethics of human dignity in the new media world. The explosive growth of social media technologies is a worldwide phenomenon. Facebook, Kentucky, Twitter, and Friendster are the new media favorite of millennials and throughout the demographic spectrum. As the platform of personal networks, the organizer of protest sites, and the sensational technology of war zone information, the social media are the leading edge of the digital revolution that is reorganizing the planet. As our mental images are being constructed in 2016, they are increasingly based on and arise from digital technologies. Even as we deal with the complicated issues of conflict zones, our media world itself is undergoing a historic shift. Following the theme of the conference, our self-identities are mediated, and the mediation structure is shifting radically to the digital. Media ethics is engaging the new media technologies with a special interest in the identity question. for understanding the ethical dimension of mental image making in social conflict, the philosophy of technology gives us the distinctive perspective that this new social media phenomena promotes amorality, thus giving the ethical domain an overwhelming challenge. Media ethics, for its very rationale, needs active moral agents who make responsible decisions. Thus, the status and character of identity is crucial. The question is whether the new technologies enhance a person's moral discernment or foster a world in which ethics is alien and trivialized. The ethical principle of human dignity is of primary importance to media ethics across the globe and is pertinent to the identity issue. In fact, scholarship in ethics contributes a deep understanding of mental map making. Let me summarize my argument. The new social media technologies, abundant and powerful as media systems, are a world of artifice, of means without ends. The problem in a new media age overwhelmed by electronic instruments is a vacuum of normlessness. Ideals and ends are buried under electronic means. Making moral decisions and working on ethical principles are an anachronism, with a society's mental and material resources devoted to the technological phenomenon instead. I develop now systematically the philosophy of technology's perspective on the ethics of modern identity formation in political, cultural conflict. A new information age is taking shape with upheavals across the globe. More digital information was produced in the last 12 months than 5,000 years of knowledge production. There are 31 billion searches on Google and Baidu every month to access it. The new media menagerie of fiber optics, supercomputer data, wireless and satellite technology, although inescapably global, is local and personal as well. Social media are the heart and soul of the Web 2.0 revolution. Digital media have distinctive features as a technological system. Every medium has its own grammar, that is, the elements enabling it to communicate. Our basis of knowing is now shifting to an interactive, anywhere, anytime, global experience, with people the facilitators and weavers of networks instead of participants in intersubjective dialogue. Electronic space is being reinvented as mobile territory, and transit itself is the new normal. Language is the public agent through which human identity is realized. In a symbolic approach to communication, concepts are not isolated from their representations. In our linguistically structured environments, symbols participate in the meaning of what they represent. Whenever symbols are given a new mediation, the changes in life and culture must be understood historically and evaluated morally. when there is massive digital intrusion into the verbal symbol system, humans are creating what they identify as a new reality. Symbolic theory presumes that the history of communication is central to the history of civilization, that changes in symbolic forms have a profound impact on the structure of consciousness. Therefore, media ethics must engage this new technological world, fully aware that this lingual system has its own distinctive properties that represent a shift in history, from oral to print to broadcast to digital. And therefore, this basic question: what is the nature of self-identity in the digital age? The Canadian communication theorist Harold Innis introduces the concept monopoly of knowledge to describe the shifts from one medium to another. The new technologies that come to dominate are not merely additional instruments for a society to use. History demonstrates that the new forms of communication tend to monopolize the previous ones. The new technologies organize time and space in a different way. We may still read about war zone conflict in newspapers and watch broadcast news from Crimea in this time of transition to the digital, but these media don't have the authority of truth for us any longer. Grant Keane puts the Innis space-time criteria to work in his recent book, Global Technography, Ethnography in the Age of Mobility, studying mobile phone technology in North America, China, South Korea, and Japan. He documents that our understanding of media technology is an intimate facet of our self-identity. Technologies are inseparable from our human existence. They are an irreducible component of ontology. Mediation alters perceptions of both time and space. Space becomes teledistance, while time becomes telepresent. With the new instantaneous technologies, the distance required for interpretation and abstraction is obliterated. With the compression of history into the momentary and the evisceration of spatial limits, the signifiers of selfhood can be described as existence everywhere, always, and nowhere, never. With monopoly of knowledge in my mind, the question for today is what understanding of human identity is being produced by the digital technology as it increasingly determines the production of knowledge in social conflict. The monopoly of knowledge idea as one way to explain the movement from one media system to another indicates that our assumptions about mental map making, which we have developed over the centuries and maintained through the print and broadcast eras, may no longer be understood or even recognized. The ethical principle of human dignity is of primary importance to media ethics and is directly pertinent to the identity question. Different cultural traditions affirm human dignity in a variety of ways, but together they insist that all human beings have sacred status without exception. For the philosopher Immanuel Kant, we ought to treat human beings as ends in themselves and not merely as means. for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations in 1984, recognition of the inherent dignity of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. In the monotheistic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all human beings have dignity because they are made in the image of God. These are a few examples of the idea that humans are a unique species requiring from within itself regard for its members as a whole. The ethics of human dignity is rooted in the belief that human beings have intrinsic worth. This ethical principle expresses the inherent dignity of the human species. Intrinsic worth is ontologically prior to legal mechanisms of conferral. It is not a privilege for which one has gratitude. Media ethics contributes the fundamental norm of human dignity for guiding the process of mental map-making in social conflict. And it is here that the philosophy of technology confronts us with the supreme challenge. For the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, technology is an ontological issue. Humans do not stand outside technology, as instrumentalism assumes, but technology is intertwined with the existential structure of human being. The foundations of this technological enterprise are rooted in human life. In Heidegger's existentialism, technology is not the application of science, but a cultural construction. Technology is not merely tools or products, but a mode of revealing humanness. The crisis we face is not electronic machines per se, but our life world having a technological structure that stipulates for us what human identity means. Following this tradition, the French social philosopher Jacques Ellul states the technological revolution in moral terms. His classic, The Technological Society, opposes the superficial instrumentalism in which tools, media, are considered neutral and functional. His analysis centers on the fundamental distinction in ethics between means and ends. Because of the overwhelming magnitude of technical means, ends have lost their salience. For Ellul, the existential problem is the very demise of ends themselves. When referencing the technological age, normlessness is the typical word for relativism, and the vacuum of normlessness can be explained this way. Technical efficiency in social media and ends are buried in a mutually exclusive framework. Ideals are lost under the busyness of advancing our instruments, and moral judgments become impossible. Life becomes amoral, devoid of moral categories. Norm becomes an alien word lost in scientific and engineering language. There is immorality for sure: murder, cheating, lying, cruelty, corruption. But those specifics we can deal with by punishing them using the law, courts, and police. In amorality, the concept of norms does not communicate anything meaningful. Amorality is the right word here, without morality. Moral excellence in the Twitter age tends to be sacrificed to technical excellence. When the efficiency, speed, and productivity of technologies dominate, morality in human life does not flourish. Rose bushes do not grow at the North Pole, and ethics does not prosper in a world committed to technique. Anders Sandberg of Oxford University argues that the people movements created by social media are a train wreck for knowledge production. Its image board subculture values anonymity and fosters a hostile, abusive atmosphere. Enveloped in the technological givens of the social media software rules, participants are tragically unreflective about the very nature of what public discourse is supposed to be. Anonymous participants have no culpability. Naked digits from unknown or ambiguous sources do not themselves serve human dignity. All raw information possible, true and false, information and disinformation, gossip and news, vindictiveness and lament, the common good and propaganda, they equal information cacophony, not the symbolic language of human worthiness. In toxic and vitriolic people movements, 2 million tweets equals zero identity enrichment. Research on the role of Twitter, Facebook, Kentucky, and social conflict is reflecting Sanders' analysis. The anonymity of internet technology fosters abuse rather than human dignity. The new media were central in organizing the Arab Spring 2011. The social media were the key to massive protests from Tunisia to Egypt's Tahrir Square. The 30-year-old Google executive Waheed Ghonim was a hero of the digital revolt, using a double tweet, Mubarak, leave. Western governments, stay out of our business. And when Hosni Mubarak finally gave his resignation speech, Ghonim declared victory in Twitter code, Revolution 2.0, mission accomplished. The social media, the key for strategy, but in substance and cohesive argument, the social networks failed. For the ongoing battles between good and evil that social transformations require, internet technology has not been able to carry the load. Initial research indicates the same social network phenomenon in Ukraine's historic conflict since 2014. The positive role of the social media for rallying the Euromaidan protest is undisputed. Massive people movements in Kiev would have been impossible without the internet. Social media were essential for bringing in first-time protesters, and text and oral messages from mobile phones to family and friends expanded the network and made specific details available. But research is pointing to the social media's dark side in the violent zones. Pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian combat is represented partially and episodically, usually without context, and the dramatic fragments going viral on the networks. Omitted information is disinformation, and powerful centralized propaganda networks set the agenda. The technology of ephemeral bits is not designed to provide the logic and clarify the issues following the norm of human dignity. A philosophy of the human as moral beings is necessary for media ethics. Its status among those who live by the social media is a difficult research question. But some studies are emerging now on the basic issue of our human awareness and consciousness in the digital age, and it opens pathways for further exploration. Sherry Turkle's research shows that in the digital era, people are increasingly drawn to technologies that provide the illusion of companionship without the demands of relationship. She writes of the flight from conversation, as people find it increasingly difficult to talk personally with one another. Other scholars speak of the internet paradox, that the emergence of Facebook, Kentucky, Twitter, and other social media ironically correlates with a marked increase in loneliness. We have never been more detached from one another. Our omnipresent new technologies lure us toward increasingly superficial connections at the same time as they make avoiding the messiness of human interaction easier. Professor Turkle at MIT, one of America's greatest information technology universities, is arguing for reclaiming personal conversation in the home, office, and school as the key to sustaining our humanness during the technological revolution at hand. Nicholas Carr's two most recent books on the New York Times bestsellers list, The Shallows and The Glass Cage, present a historical perspective and the most recent evidence from neurological science to ask whether our surfing the internet actually benefits the neural pathways of our brain and impedes comprehension and retention. The philosophy of technology speaks to the question of human agency in the digital age in terms of oral culture. The disembodied intimacy of digital mediation is considered fundamentally different from the intimacy of personal interaction. The German Gegenwart, with its connotations of both present and presence, captures the oral ethos. Human communities of sound and hearing are organized around the present tense, but oral relationships exude presence as well. Sound magnetizes, draws persons and experiences into direct contact with each other and the life situations on which meaning ultimately depends. Oral communication belongs to the human race. All known peoples learning to speak before 2 years of age, with all the known languages equally complex in phonetics, phonemics, and syntax. Print technologies reduce accessibility, requiring an education to read. Electronic technologies can only be purchased and maintained by a limited number of the world's people. The social media tend to operate with human agents as nodules in an electronic network, which Jean Baudrillard calls the simulacra. Life is being redefined as a data processing entity. Human life is reconfigured into a potential source of energy for the technological apparatus. The concept of a synthetic self challenges the traditional ethics of identity consciousness. Ethics that depended on intersubjective communication for its livelihood now needs to recover the philosophy of the human for media ethics to be understood. Ethics needs a human habitat to survive. Ethical theory and application can only be done from a human-centered home. The original meaning of ethos is abode and dwelling place. What does it mean for the ethics of human dignity that the participants in social media are primarily facilitators of networks, typically anonymous? Research is identifying the digital self as everywhere, always, and nowhere, never, whereas the identity in ethics presumes the intrinsic worthiness of the embodied species. Dwelling is a fundamental idea in Heidegger, that is, living in community, feeling at home, settled. In Heidegger's summary, only if we are capable of dwelling, only then can we build. To dwell, to be set at peace, means to remain at peace within the free sphere preserved. The fundamental character of dwelling is sparing, memory, rootedness, nurturing our worldview. In Heidegger's classic, The Question Concerning Technology, our beingness is situated today in technological conditions radically opposed to human worthiness. There are no oases where the moral imagination can prosper undisturbed. But given his long history in the philosophy of language, Heidegger sees a glimmer of hope in artistic symbols. Through art's revival, there is an alternative to technological revealing. The move is familiar throughout the Heideggerian emphasis on the primal role of the poet. Poetically, people dwell on the earth. The artistic mode of revealing opens new pathways of saying, being. Poetics symbolizes a domain discrete from the technocratic mystique. The arts, music, philosophy, theology, history, and literature should prosper in constructing an ethics of human dignity for the digital age. Nancy Fraser argues for spaces of withdrawal and regroupment, subaltern counterpublics that have emancipatory potential. With machinic efficiency, there is no fixed abode, and its fluidity means the absence of ethics or moral indifference. The imperative of dwelling from the philosophy of technology opens a pathway for human dignity to be understood. While the powerful new media technologies store data and transmit information through their networks, the digital synthetic self challenges the self-conscious ethics of human dignity on the deepest possible level. Philosophers of technology in the Heideggerian tradition have argued that we need an oral home, a location in history and geography, to avoid solipsism and to understand ourselves as moral agents. Within media, the online publication Granary Rue, Internews Ukraine, the My Media program, Lviv's Tivo Misto TV, are abodes of alternative symbols where human dignity can serve as the normative ideal. In education, media ethics, in the age age of the social media needs the dwelling of the humanities and humanistic social science to develop a non-technological understanding of being. A credible ethics of human dignity is possible if rooted in the liberal arts, where questions of life's purpose and moral values predominate. Dwellings in the media and dwellings in education with a fundamentally moral symbol system are not designed to destroy structured, digitalized disinformation regimes, but they testify to human dignity and therefore to peaceful transformation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Dear Professor Christians, thank you for such an inspiring keynote for our guests and participants. So, difference right now we have 8 minutes more for questions and answers. To the professor, please take this chance. If there are already questions, we will ask. If not, I will. Okay, we'll start immediately from our guests.
Thank you very much for your speech. My name is Alexander Yarushuk. I am a student of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy's School of Journalism. I want to ask you about social media and media. So, in your opinion, how can we journalists use social media today to preserve and develop ethics and to inform public with taking all of the standards of journalism itself? So preserve ethics, develop it, and to do journalism with all the standards.
We are in the age of transition from oral to print, from print to broadcast. A century before the one became the monopoly of knowledge over the other. I am arguing from the philosophy of technology perspective that we ought not to see this new revolution, this new digital technological form, as simply another possibility. We have oral, print, broadcast, now another option. It's more complicated than that. History has shown, at least communication theory makes the argument, that as the new forms take hold and begin, in this case now, to digitalize knowledge, create the archives of knowledge, and the transmission system that dominates, it doesn't eliminate the other possibilities, but makes them secondary. Now, I'm arguing that for ethics, we need a home that's oral. I'm using oral communication as the standard by which to judge this new form. In this era of transition, when as a matter of fact, digital communication now is beginning to show its power as the primary mode of knowledge production. That's why I use the example of war news coming in a virile, digital format, putting broadcast news and print as a secondary and not believed format. It's there, but it represents the establishment, not a people's agenda like the new digital. So now to your question. If in our media enterprises, such as newspapers, broadcasting, you're in journalism, online technologies are being added, but the media system insists that they meet the same standards of truth as the print product and broadcast, that has possibilities during this age of transition to keep its raging power with boundaries. In the United States, Huffington Post is a digital online system. And it has said, even though we're now inviting information from all over the world, not having reporters assigned for a newspaper or for broadcast that work for us as our employees, therefore they're accountable to us. It's information that can come from everywhere, but we will pursue that information, find what its sources are, double check on it, use the same standards for its truth quotient as we do elsewhere. And it's amazing to me that Huffington Post, the first online system to win a Pulitzer Prize in reporting. So in this age of transition, it seems to me that's exactly the way we ought to handle it, as you're suggesting, to realize that in terms of its own givens, in which the present and the distant, in which history and geography are collapsed into the anywhere, nowhere, at all times presentism, until that dominates, and it's going to, in the same way print finally made oral culture secondary. That shows if we can use the standards that we've known for truth that require a geography. You have to have location and a historical location, and insist that forms of communication under our rubric as a newspaper. In that sense, we can resist the direction by making it secondary rather than the reversal that's increasingly occurring and will, I predict, dominate in the decades ahead. With now 7 billion cell phones in the world, to assume that the digital world will continue to stay at bay, and the digital way of constructing knowledge, such as I presented with Anders Sandberg, the Oxford research thinker, if we can find ways of reconstructing it, important to do. But I was arguing for something slightly different, and that is continuing to find those places where oral culture, where exchange and debate, where the meaning of life's purpose, where liberal arts thinking, critical thinking that comes from the liberal arts is still predominant. And we hold these up as testimonies, as kind of prophetic communication. This is what human dignity means. A thoughtful question that needs more elaboration.
Thank you. We have time for the last question, the only one. Evgeny is closer.
Thank you so much for your great presentation. My question is basically jumping on what you just said about the spread of social media and bringing new practices to that. So I'm a big evangelist for new media, for digital media, and for social media. But I'm always thinking about quite paradoxical situation, because we see a lot of new opportunities arriving in journalism, a lot of new instruments, platforms to communicate ideas, but unfortunately very often it does not make journalism richer in terms of the facts, in terms of the serving audience's interest, and we see more and more of very opinionated content rather than facts and other things which were considered to be a journalism. And the same is happening with social media. We see the proliferation of very unknowledgeable opinions very often, and people usually do not take advantage of using existing opportunities to do more fact-checking, to find new things, to do all what we've been expected. People would be using digital instruments. So how you can comment on this? Thank you.
And also we have one question from our student Yaroslava. We'll hear then two questions, and
Okay.
probably you can combine your answer in one.
My name is Yaroslava. I'm interested in your point of view about manipulations in hybrid war, and how do you think if use Baudrillard's theory about simulacra like a tool for understanding modern age of digital society, is it possible to fight face to face with manipulations and simulacra, or even destroy it?
I love these questions. I wish we could go on all day. But my colleague from stopfake.org, and the question now on the floor is the struggle that we're going through around the world in the journalism enterprise, recognizing its crucial importance for democratic and political life generally. And how do we welcome the contributions that interactive technologies can make? Al Jazeera has decided to have locations around the world with people who know digital technology to send them information on the spot, where they witness it when an earthquake or a hospital collapses or there's a tragedy of some kind. And the option of being on the ground that interactive technologies give is momentous. So it's another way to think about what I'm presenting. That is, okay, Mr. Christians, your philosophy of technology, we've got to understand each of the technologies within their own grammar. I'll grant you that, you might say. And these questions kind of push in that direction. But rather than following the Heideggerian notion, the Jacques Ellul claim that they will monopolize, let's do our best to include them within the journalism system, within and under the ethics of truth and of non-violence and of human dignity, and just work our way through this revolution. It's important for conferences like this, and I'm going back to the United States with great learning from the conference, to know that because the technologies are ubiquitous, the new social media, we're struggling with it everywhere. And we look for then these possibilities in which it's being done with imagination. I believe the educational programs that are represented here, as I know them, UCU, is trying to think that way in terms of this new field and how we can reorganize ourselves. The argument that the issues I'm raising about the new media phenomenon as not being able, because it's anonymous primarily, because it's present in its orientation, because it teledistances the world, is not able to produce the notion of human dignity well. Well, the implications of both comments are that in the hectic, complicated world of the media regimes now, we face the same problem. We need dwelling or alternative symbol systems. Perhaps just one more comment to elaborate on the point about the arts. Heidegger is saying, and I agree with him fundamentally, if technology creates a symbolic universe that's different from the symbolic structure of the universe before, and that doesn't happen outside of my being, but my own humanness is integrated with that. And my changes in the humanocentric world are fundamental. So that's why when he gave his lecture at the Bavarian Academy for the Arts, now in the book, The Question Concerning Technology, he said to the artists there, you develop a different symbol system. You create through your visuals the cutting edge of what the world ought to be. If technologies as we see them are interested in the are able to present the superficial, then what I challenge you to do is to keep testifying to the world of a different way of understanding. And that promotion of the arts as another symbolic form that gets closer to human meaning, I believe that's a relevant conclusion, whether we're still in the age of transition, which we are, or when the new media, social media, dominate and actually monopolize the knowledge systems we have. Thank you for giving me the time to respond to these terrific questions.
Thank you, Professor Christians. If you have more questions, please approach Professor during our 2 days conference, especially during coffee break.